Joanne Wilson, and this is Positively Gotham Gal. Real, honest, and meaningful conversations with women entrepreneurs about their approach to life, business, and everything in between.
Myra Laldin is the founder of VR Perspectives and a pioneer in harnessing the potential of VR storytelling in diversity and inclusive training. We got together to discuss how she combines her background in business and behavioral science to improve strategic business performance through XR. You can learn more about VR Perspectives at their website, vrperspectives.com.
Thank you so much for coming on today. You know, you have such an interesting background and unconventional, upbringing of how you were, where you're from, how you grew up, how that impacted you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I grew up in Pakistan, and I think just what makes that interesting is, I was constantly in extreme marginalization and then extreme privilege as well. And just that back and forth of what I say, like waters, your culture, your norms, was really interesting. And so my parents are, we're like fourth generation Christians in Pakistan. And Pakistan is a very conservative Muslim country, if your listeners know anything about it. And if you follow the news, there's always something with religious minorities going on here. So yeah, so it's, like the blasphemy law against minorities or something like that. And for me, my parents started a hospital like 35 years ago, way up in the north of Pakistan, where there was like no medical care. There's also no real roads or infrastructure either. So we really lived in a village. My dad's a doctor and my mom's just like a general badass, adventurous badass. Yeah. So she did all like the hospitality and stuff because we'd have doctors come visit and things. So they provide low cost medical care for the people of the area there.
That's pretty amazing.
And so more hospitals have popped up now, but at that time there was nothing there. People would walk for hours down the mountain to get to a hospital. So because we lived in such a remote area, my parents decided to send us to a boarding school. And this boarding school happened to be, for diplomats and kind of nonprofit workers and, NGOs. And it was a Western school. So it was, more British, a mix of like British and American curriculum. And we were the only Pakistani family in there. And so that's why I think the upbringing of like kind of understanding two very opposing ways of life or privilege, being a woman in Pakistan in a very, conservative Islamic country, then being a religious minority on top of that, feeling that every day when you walk out.
The school, which is basically
a Western,
place, and no one comes from where you come from.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, I loved it. What it did for me was, I really think, one of my advisors said this, they're like, basically I have no cultural norm because I've been around so many different. And so it's really easy for me to adapt and be flexible, which is like what a lot of third culture kids, what they call. Have you heard of the term third culture kid?
That makes sense to me. I mean, my husband went to graduate school. There was plenty of people there, as well as when he went to, well, actually not as much when he went to MIT because it was a different time period.
Yeah.
But, I was always fascinated by those kids because they had made this decision to go to the school outside their countries.
Yeah.
And I always thought, well, you're going to go back? Like, are you going to start a family here? Because you start a family here, then all of a sudden
you're here. Yeah.
You're here. And, the cousins 3 generations down will be like, oh yeah, we have relatives.
Back then. Yeah. It's so fascinating being able to like study with different cultures and stuff because nothing's really a norm. And I would say that privilege was like going to one of the best schools in the world. It like really like our teachers were so good, and just being in that environment. But that like juxtaposition of the two had a real impact on like my perception of the world.
It had to have. And so when did your interest in VR technology begin?
So we use VR technology as just a medium for experiential learning. Like this isn't like the end and be all of all learning. It's a medium. What's important is like the content that we create and the discussions that we do around it,
There was this conversation for a while, which is, this is the killer, app, or this is the
Yeah,
killer.
it's always something. The hot.
It's like, I think it's just how you use it.
Exactly. And a lot of companies are using it, but just like it's the same leadership training, but now in VR. It's like, no, you need to use the medium to its fullest extent. You have to understand the learning science behind everything. So I got into VR because of the potential that it holds for experiential learning. That's really what it is. Our trainings aren't like all in the headset. It's a piece of it.
You were drawn to experiential learning.
Exactly. Yeah, because it ties back to, what, cultural competency. What does that come from? That comes from experiences, right? So we're trying to multiply people's experiences. I look at my own life and I use a lot of the lessons that I've learned. Like that's what I'm trying to replicate basically. And VR is the easiest way to do that because not everyone will get to live this life in multiple countries with multiple cultures and different people to see the different perspectives.
Yes, which is unfortunate because if we all did, I think the perspective across everything we do would change dramatically.
It would really, yeah. It would just, what it would do is if it only did this to tell you that you are not the norm, that's a big thing. That's especially in America. Like everything is weird or different if it's not what you know.
100%. I mean, when you go to other countries, when people would say, it's super strange there, or they have, they're so different there. And it's just like, no, just because they're not like you doesn't mean they're strange or different. It's just a very different culture and how they operate.
Right.
So, even here, I remember when I was a kid going to my parents' friends in Long Island, and I was just like, their accent. And I was, I mean, I was like 8 years old, and I just kept focusing on the way they spoke. And of course, I spoke strange to them too.
Yeah. It's just different. It's all different. Yeah.
And so how did you end up, getting into it and thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to use it to train leaders and make people think differently? Like that journey began.
So, my background's in cross-cultural business and communication. So, doing business across cultures. That's what I love. That's a lot about the cultural competency, multicultural intelligence. So when I went to grad school, I'd focused on the business side of this. Now I wanted to focus on the brain and psychology of it. So that's what I studied. And after that, I started doing organizational behavior. And what I was finding was in the corporate space was just, and in general, one, research is not meeting practice. That was a frustration. And then two, just training really has, the way that current training is done, there's very little to no impact. And if you look at the research, a lot of this has been counterproductive, the way that it's being done now and the way it has been done. If Frank Dobbs has like fascinating research on that. So I became jaded. I was like, well, I'm not going to be in this space because there's no change here. Like it was frustration,
Corporate anything is frustrating.
Well, it just like, true, like the slowness and stuff. But yeah, the training especially is like you're throwing thousands of, like millions of dollars actually toward training, and you're just doing it ineffectively. And a lot of it is like check the box stuff,
It's
so
a lot of check the box stuff.
A lot of the and not just in D&I stuff, like in a lot of things, a lot of check the box. Once I like learned about VR about 7 years ago, I was just like, wow, like this is it. This is, I always say like the ultimate empathy machine for one. This is how we can scale experiences for people. We learn by experience, and this is how we can scale and multiply people's experiences. So that's how I was like, yes, this is where I'm going. And I didn't know exactly where I was going to go. But I started the company, it was a more consulting at the time. And, this was 7 years ago. So Perspectives, that's, 7, 8 years ago, it was born. And then like slowly to see it take shape with the VR, having an amazing team to create these experiences that, just have such a visceral response. And, we're social learners, right? So afterwards, like consolidating and crystallizing what we saw, what we reflect together, and then like how is that going to impact the culture that we have today? What do you notice in your culture?
So it's almost like corporate psychology.
Yes, a lot actually. Corporate psychology, and I use a lot of like learning sciences, so neuros and neuroscience. We have very specific ways of how we teach. It's not like we do what we call like there's certain levers of change, and we try to we have like 12 different things that we're going to try and kind of pull and make sure that like this will set us up to the most amount of like behavioral and culture change.
So I'm in a corporation.
Yeah.
Company comes in and you say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to use VR so that you have a better understanding of your colleagues, of your business as a global platform. Then what happens?
Yeah. So we'll come in and I'm trying to be careful what I say because I'm going to get in trouble with my lawyer because our competitors keep copying what we're doing. So I have to be careful before we trademark stuff. Okay. So, we come in and high level, we're coming in, we're doing a training with you. You're going through VR. We debrief these sessions. There's reflection questions and we try to hit all the different points of it's active learning. There's metacognition in there. It's social learning together. So it's going through this, like, you're not just in the headset and then you're done. We're going to like unpack this. And what it does is we call it like constructivist learning, where we're not telling you anything. You're going through an experience and you're coming out and telling us what you observed. And then crystallizing that learning by hearing each other's, like you might have observed something that they didn't and what that felt like. And, we're super strategic about how we get people to talk about it. It's hard for people to talk about emotion at work.
It's hard to talk about emotion at home.
At home, it's hard to talk about emotion. Okay, people, it's vulnerability, right? So the way that we do it is we build on it. So as a character, as a person in VR, you're Max. So when we come out, we say, how did this feel as Max? So you're not talking about your emotions, you're talking about Max's emotions, but you felt them, right? So I felt dismissed, I felt angry. So what happens is, like, over time, the conversation shifts from Max to I felt this, I felt that. And so now it just happens in a natural way that they're not being put on the spot of what did you feel? And then it starts to, we're teaching these concepts, but what it's also doing at the same time is building trust and vulnerability to be able to talk to one another about these topics. The last client we just had, they're a bunch of engineers, older. This company's been around for, decades. And their leaders' feedback was like, wow, one, the people who are usually not vocal were so vocal in your discussions. And two, they took ownership and like built, of the tools and stuff. Because they create the solutions with us. We're not giving them to them. They're giving us solutions, right? And just because what we did was we allowed, one of the levers of change is a sense of belonging. And what we did was we started in a place where we're just talking about inclusion, exclusion, not putting on a perspective of race or gender or anything. We're just talking about what did this feel for you? So no answer is wrong. So they feel seen and heard, and then they're part of the solution rather than ostracizing, men or like white people or,
Which is interesting. I mean, it goes back to, I think, my personal theory, which started, over a decade ago, is that work has become completely blended into our lifestyle and our personal life. So, work is an extension of you. Work is something that we all have to do. And it also, you get up every day and you have something to do. But in corporate, many times, or in certain companies, at one point they get so large, you just become like, I do my job, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that the opportunity, what you're providing is that, yes, it's just a job, but there is the opportunity to be understanding, inclusive, opening up your mind to other things, and at the end of the day, making you a better human being through work.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's such a good point. Like, it's so connected, and it's, our identity comes from what we do as well. Like, as much as people want to say it doesn't, it really does. And really does. Feeling like I'm contributing to the team, feeling that my work is acknowledged, that I'm seen and heard. It's so huge on engagement at work and like getting you to the point where you have the ability for like creative problem solving, that motivation and stuff, right? How you're feeling at work impacts how you're going to treat your family when you get home.
100%.
It's not a separation. It's a blend, right? Exactly what you said.
They can walk out the door and turn off their brain.
Yeah.
I compartmentalize it. Like that's not a good talent.
That's not a good talent. No. And what we're trying to teach is like, we're teaching you skills of basically like what TCKs have. Those are the skills we're trying to teach you through these experiences.
And
so it's
TCK is what?
Third culture kids. Basically means you grew up in a different culture. That, you can look up that research. It's just like those kids are much more adaptable will be the main thing, but they regulate emotion much better. And these are all skills that we want to thrive in a multicultural world. Gen Z is coming up and their expectations of the workforce are much different than millennials are.
And the work you're doing is so important because unfortunately the majority of people running our country now are light years away from, Gen Z. So they have
Yeah.
real concept why government works, runs so slow. The ability to live the older we are got a huge change
Gap. Yeah.
the youth and, older generations.
Right. And it comes back to that experiences, like where we're staying in our bubbles. And the more that we mix, that's really the key, and research shows that too, like mixing is like what's going to stop us from having a single story on a whole group of people. Because that's the danger, right? The danger of the single story. Yeah.
And so what's your vision for your company? Which, can we note that you bootstrap this whole thing? Is that correct? You never took
Yes.
any cash from anyone?
Yes. No, we have not taken cash.
You're part of the 100% club. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there like that.
Yeah. So I've given equity like to my teammates.
Well, that's different.
And it's definitely come to a place where it's, there's been some stuff come up with, there's competitors coming in the market and that's what they're doing. Right. So me as a CEO, I'm so ingrained in my work and like the science of it comes from me, that like, I'm not going out there and raising funds. I also don't want someone else to dictate the way that we teach,
That's fair. But I would say to you, I'm sure that the people coming into your industry, I can only imagine, are just well-funded bros more than likely.
No, there's women of color.
But they're very well-funded. And,
yeah.
But you've done something that's been very authentic and you build it from scratch, and your experiences are, right there at the front door. And, you've built something profitable. Obviously, you couldn't continue to operate that. At one point, you'll find the right person that will allow you to do what you want to do. It's just
getting to that next level. Yeah. I'm not closed off to funding, but yeah, I'm super proud of my team that we've been running on revenue. It's like awesome revenue based. And yeah, that in itself is like a huge accomplishment. I'm really proud of that.
It should be. So what is your vision for VR in the future, and where do you take this? I mean, you've been mostly doing corporate, of course, which allows you to grow. I mean,
yeah.
Where do you think this should go? Should this be in every elementary school in the country? So
I think, again, like experiential learning is the best way to learn. I see this going into parenting. I see this going into couples. It's just about giving a different perspective and like creating frameworks for them to see the world, to have shared meaning. And right now it's VR. Because it's all about the experiential learning, multiplying people's experiences, but it could eventually be, we might move to AR. It could eventually be like a hologram. It's all about the experience, So I see this, for perspectives, it's very much corporate, because that's where right now with new technology enterprises, the Fortune 50s above, like that's who has the budgets for it. I want to get into schools, talk about bullying, help them see different perspectives on that. Even the police academies, I'd like to work with them.
That would be really good.
Yeah, we're talking to a few right now. So there's a lot. It's just being able to create a way for people to explore the world from a different perspective. Yeah.
So is that what you mean when you say harnessing tech for good?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's positive social change. My personal mission, and I think for VR perspectives as well, is to help people live to their fullest potential. And what that means is you have to have an environment that allows that. So in my team too, we do a lot of focus on, we say we're a DDO, a deliberately developmental organization. And what that means is I'm making sure that everybody is being developed, character, but also in their skills and getting to take on different roles and learning. And because I want them to be able to, whether they stay on with me or not, like I want my team to live to their fullest potential, and being able to like try different things is one of the greatest way for them to figure out what they like.
I mean, when our children were younger, we always traveled. I mean, really traveled. And I always felt that was the greatest gift we could possibly give them. And as they've grown into adults, they still love traveling, but it also gave them a completely different perspective on the world. And where they went to school did too. And I think that they have seen from a lot of the people that are their peers and friends that they have crossed paths with over the years that haven't had those perspectives. it's been very eye-opening that those opportunities allowed them to think about the world in a very, very different way.
Yeah. Yeah. It created more, basically what's happening is if you're very insular, you have, because you have a fewer level of varied experiences, your neural pathways are just like, those are the ingrained in the same things. And when we start getting to meet people that are different from our current experience, we get to start building new, pathways or brain routines and stuff. And I think that's why I'm saying like that, exactly like your kids got to travel. Those experiences are so important. And like, how can we multiply them for people sitting in corporate, corporate America?
Well, it's wonderful that you've used VR. I think that,
Yeah.
as we said earlier, is everyone jumped on this as like,
Yeah.
this is it,
Yeah.
but there's something so unique about VR.
Yes.
If it's used in this type of way. Did you find your experience as a founder and as a woman made any difference in how you went about the world? I mean, generally I have found that founders that come from outside this country don't have the same sort of feelings that a lot of female founders do. They're always like, what are you talking about? Did you feel that way, or did you feel like, it was much more difficult?
Yeah, I think I know that if I go after funding, it's going to be like another level of difficulty, but it's awesome because I'm like armed with all the research of the bias. So I when this happens, I call it out.
By the way, going into someone's office when you're profitable is like the
Yes.
ultimate feeling, because you're like, I really don't need your money.
Yeah. If you want a partner, come along, but we don't need you. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been extremely difficult, actually. I think the biggest part is, like I said, developing our team. And like my tech bros, they were tech bros. And, now people meet my team and they're like, wow, your culture is so awesome. And your guys are so woke. And I was like, this is blood, sweat, and tears. Like, this didn't just happen. I didn't just hire this way. This was, even to start this work, like it was a little bit of like ridicule talking about the female experience and stuff. They didn't get it, until the first time that we built something and other women went through it who came out like with tears and saying this is what they experienced. I remember the developers just being like, whoa, like everything Myra was saying is real now. I place a lot of importance on, not only am I trying to help people in corporate live to their fullest potential, but it's also my team. And so I place a lot of importance on that. The culture was huge. Most startups don't really spend a lot of time with internal culture, but we really try to practice what we preach. So that's actually been, for me, the people element, to be a good leader, to be an effective leader, and to be able to serve my team well. That has actually been like one of the most difficult, but also the most rewarding pieces of it.
Sure. And how many people are on your team?
We have about 12 now. Yeah. Growing.
That's great.
So
I think you're right. I don't think enough people spend time on that. And I don't think a lot of people are great managers, right? You have an idea and then you go grow, but your managing skills are lacking. And
right.
Being able to manage a team and having them walk out the door every day and feel fantastic is absolutely the most rewarding thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We just did an exercise on like branding, and we said like, oh, if you had to write a love letter, like to VR Perspectives, like what would you say? And, it was just so heartwarming to read some of the stuff, just that, this feels like a safe place. I can be myself. I'm learning to, those types of things, which is what I want for what we're teaching our clients.
Right.
It's happening inside our team. So that makes me feel really, really good. But it's also been difficult, just like I face the bias of, I'm the leader of my team, this is my company, and yet when we used to go to clients, they would assume that the dudes they'd ask them questions. And I taught my team like ways to redirect, so they've gotten really good at it, just even shifting your body where their feet are pointing. If it points more towards me, the others will start shifting too, to constantly, in a polite way, it's not confrontational, it's redirecting back. Myra's a leader on this, but I've definitely had like, my team didn't notice in the beginning that we'd go to places and, silly things like we're standing in a row to shake hands and they shake all the guys' hands, skip me, shake this guy, and then come back to me. I was like, why was that necessary? And just pointing out these things to my team, like the micro behaviors, now I can just like call it out when I see, or call it in as it happens, or I'll make like a joke about it to the person in a non-confrontational way. But like when that happens, as a younger woman and just starting a new company, it's kind of like, what the heck? Like, I know I write about these things. I know we create experiences around them, but it's just like, how is this still happening?
That is a great question. How is it still happening? But
right?
Tremendous credit for calling it out. I think if I fully believe that if more women would see something in the moment and call it out, that we would get to where we want to get a lot quicker.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we talk about, because what's happening is why you can't call it out is because you haven't been in that situation or you don't know how to react in that moment, right? When someone starts a new job, it's like, whoa, did that just happen? And then if you're not able to address it right then, it's going to keep happening, right? So even teaching the skills, like in one of our modules, that's like the perspective around gender, is we use it as an empowerment tool as well, to be like, okay, when this happens, what can we do to react? It's kind of stress inoculation, like prepping you. This will happen in the workforce. What are we going to do to address it and call it out in a respectful way, in a way that kind of throws a wrench into like usually the male counterparts, like general brain routine of how he treats women, you know?
Yes. I mean, even particularly as we're seeing a lot of these elder men, and I want to say elder because I don't know if it's happening with younger men as much, because it's a different generation of sexual abuse, way that they're treating people. I'm not so sure that they're that aware of what they're doing, even though they understand it's a power thing. But if women felt and were trained in a way to be able to say, hey,
yeah,
that is
it's
not
not okay.
going to happen, and that is not acceptable, for someone to be like, oh my God, like I didn't even think about it. And how do we get there?
Right. And again, I think it's like through experiences, because how do I know to call that out? Because I've had those experiences happen multiple times. I didn't speak up. And now I've been able to reflect, think about what I want to do, that like thinking about your thinking, right? Like metacognition. And, you know, that's what we need to start teaching women and men from a young age. This is know what is your boundary firstly. And then also that you should call it out. And I think what's happening, what I realized through our experiences as women went through it, was a lot of people didn't realize that other people are facing this. So, you know, one of the things that I heard was, I feel validated. I feel kind of like this, I have this reinforcement that other women are feeling this too. We weren't talking about it. And so we didn't have like a game plan of how to manage it, you know? But the more that you realize there are things, this is a shared experience, you feel more empowered to like, yeah, this is not okay, you know?
Yeah, you
and
feel like you're in your own little silo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, then it's like, shame breeds a lot of like, there's a lot of fear around it, because, you know, but as soon as you bring shame into the light, like you bring it out, like you realize there's other people going through this too. It takes away its power.
So amazing. How was the pandemic? I mean, we're still in it. How has that affected your work?
You know, we're pretty lucky. So I run two companies. One is like all custom dev VR. So that continued. We do safety training in that. We do like OSHA stuff. That continued. We lost a couple of in-person trainings. Like we were doing one with the editorial team of Harvard Business Review, and that got postponed. So it did affect us, and it was extremely stressful. But, you know, like it takes 7 times for your team to really hear you. So I kept reiterating, like, we have a plan, like we have a contingency plan, like this is what we're doing. If it gets to this is what we're going to do. So they said to me, man, like the rest of the world is like panicked, and I don't even have to worry about my job or business. Like like they felt so secure that they could like focus on their the creative process for themselves, not like I could take away that stress of money for them. So it did affect us, but thankfully somehow we're still going. Like we're getting more business, and yeah, it's exciting. We did a lot of product development in that time. I sort of stopped doing all these talks and stuff because I didn't have to travel, which was so great. It was so great because I was traveling like twice a month to do a talk, like Seattle, California. Yeah, it was a lot. And now like I've totally stopped that. And, I know that other people are like making a huge effort to be like in news articles and stuff, but I was like, I need to just focus internally and just build our product. So that's been our main focus. But from the custom dev side, stuff is still coming in and we're getting new clients. So
that's great.
It's going.
Is there anything about this year that you've surprised you about yourself?
Like on a personal level, honestly, COVID was like not the biggest thing going on. So there was just, I've had a pretty tumultuous past year and a half to just like in personal life. And I think, I just grew so much for myself as a leader, but just as a person of knowing who I am. And I just love self-development. I think it's just the best thing. So just spending a lot of time sitting in pain. I think that's something that people don't do enough. And that's actually our biggest growth moments, is when you can sit with that pain, because it's like your old self is shedding into this new, and like you have to go through that fire. We spend a lot of time trying to numb that with alcohol or just like distractions, or dating, or just something, or eating, and I think I am so proud of myself of all that pain and all that I went through, but it's like refined me to know who I am more, and also just like what I deserve as a person.
Amazing. I love that, sitting in pain. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly, this past year, the one thing that has been uncanned or actually has been allowed to be discussed is everyone's own personal mental health,
Yes.
which is something that we've ignored across the country and across
Yeah.
many countries, is that
Yeah.
everyone has their own pain and their
Right.
own emotional issues, and you take them when you're wherever they go, and you're different sizes of baggage,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all learning, as long as you're, not harming anyone, and I think it's important that you need to be moving up, whether it's a spiral, you're going in a circle, but at least you're moving up. I think that's really important, and not just, sometimes you need to just sit. That's okay.
Yeah.
But at least keep moving, keep moving eventually. Like, don't just stay there. Yeah.
No, this is great. I love what you're doing. This is very important work. I mean, certainly you're using it and have figured out how to make massive impacts within corporations, but I agree with you, police, children,
Parenting, relationships, like,
whatever
so
it may be.
yeah.
I mean, this is really, really great work, and love what you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, it all comes back to, we just need a few more, our characters built through experiences, and whether that's in a relationship or as a parent or in corporate as a coworker, it's like I can put myself in like a simulation and like learn through that first. So I know how I want to act. We're giving you a choice, basically, better decision making.
Yeah, no, I would love to go through the thing. I think what
Okay.
you're doing is really important, and I am
Yeah.
big, also as a philanthropist. I think
Okay.
that it's extremely important, and they are in all colleges. They're trying to get into all high schools.
Wow.
This is work that is going to be much more important in the decades ahead.
Yes, I agree. Yep, all of this is connected to mental health. Just, that's what we're trying to do, is create an environment where you don't have to navigate social threats. You can live to your fullest potential. You can focus on the creative problem solving, on the innovation. That's exactly it.
Potential.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
we'll
much.
be in touch then. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.